Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our virtual Iftar 2021 and thank you so much for joining us today on Zoom, Facebook and YouTube. My name is Farah and I'm going to be your host for this evening. Now we have an absolutely exciting event planned for you this evening with Dao, Dilaruddin Babu, OBE and Dr. Ismail Jalisi. And before we get started, I want to first thank our media partner for this year, which is Islam Channel. And I'd love to give a special welcome to all those joining us today from Islam Channel's Facebook and YouTube. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. I also want to thank the Arts Council UK, whose help has allowed us to continue our work this Ramadan. And all the work that we're doing, it's available on our website. And our work also includes our virtual open iftars every night of Ramadan, our Ramadan Lates course, which is going on for the first 18 days of Ramadan. So do jump in if you can. And our My Open Iftar Packs for 2021. So this year's Iftar Packs are not only helping you to bring the Ramadan spirit into your home, but in collaboration with Islamic Relief, our charity partner, with each pack you purchase, you will be feeding a person in need for a whole month. You can check out the incredible work that Islamic Relief does at iruk.co/RTP. Right, for those who are joining us, for those who are new to joining us today, our virtual open iftars are interactive, so it would be great if you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube or on Islam Channel, just hop onto the Zoom, go to ramadantechproject.com, log onto Zoom. It'll be great to see you, great to interact with you. Our speakers would love to see you and hear your comments and hear all your questions. Now, before we start, I'm going to ask if you can, please turn your cameras on. It's absolutely fantastic seeing everyone who's joining us. So if you can put your cameras on, that would be great. And I'm just going to go through the tech for those who are joining us for the first time. So at the bottom of your screen or in the More section on your mobile, there's a reactions option. So you can react in real time by thumbs up. And if you want to ask anything, you can raise your hand and tell us if you want to ask our speakers a question, or if you want to add to discussion, and someone on our back-end team will unmute you. We also have a chat box as well. So post in the chat box. We want to hear what everyone's doing. We want to hear how everyone's evening's going. So without much further ado, I'm going to ask Huda. So Huda is saying she's like coming up to Iftar time. So Huda, would you like to share where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I'm in Sweden right now. So usually Ramadan's a little bit longer here than the rest of the world. I think that's usually the case for most Scandinavian countries.
What are your fasting times?
It's about 18 hours now.
Gosh, what time slot did you start and do you end?
So I think it started at 1:40, I believe, and it's going to end at like 8:30. But I'm an hour ahead right now, so it's almost around the time.
Oh wow! So what's for Iftar today?
Spaghetti. I've been having it every single day, but spaghetti.
Does it hit the spot though?
Yes, I have a weird obsession with spaghetti and I can eat it forever.
Oh, fantastic. Like with tomato sauce, I'm just curious, or do you add meatballs?
Tomato sauce.
Oh, that's the best, isn't it? That can be really, really nice as well. And what do you have to get you through like your crazy long day?
Like in terms of
sahur, I apologize for sahur.
I actually don't have sahur. I feel like it's gone after like the first 7 days, you kind of get too filled to have sahur, and it also like iftar and sahur are kind of like really close, so don't really have it. But I know that's probably not the healthiest recommendation.
I know, but when you're doing those crazy hours, I know when in the UK when it was Ramadan in like August and July, and you're fasting from half 2 till 9:30. It's It just absolutely, you just like want to maximize the sleep, really, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you know what? Should we put our poll and see how everyone's doing today? So, Sarah's joining us as well today on her headphones while she works. So for those who are fasting, I'd be intrigued to know how your fast was today. So we've got lots of different people joining us. And also, tell us where you're calling from. So we've got Huda from Sweden, which is really awesome. Okay, let's put in the chat box, where everyone's calling from. I'm very boring. I'm calling from London, but I think Sarah is calling from somewhere a little bit more interesting. So Sarah, where are you calling from today?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm calling from Istanbul as usual. Nothing's changed. between now and every night.
It's very warmer there, I'm guessing, than in Sweden. Actually, no. What is the weather like in Sweden, Huda?
So it's kind of weird. Some days it's sunny. Yesterday it was snowing, and today it was kind of like grey skies and windy, but it wasn't that cold. It's kind of a mixed bag nowadays because it's spring.
That's odd, isn't it? Compared to Istanbul, is it like quite warm in Istanbul? Sarah? How's the fasting going there?
It's not that warm. It's starting to get warmer. It feels like it's like a cold spring so far, and fasting's okay. I feel like well, I work UK time, so I fall asleep and wake up way later than I should. So fasting's easy.
That sounds all right. What have you got for Iftar today? Because you also seem to have some really yummy food. So Sarah's like been telling about the Turkish food and also the Egyptian food. For those who like joined us earlier in the week, I've learned so much about molokhia and I'd never heard of this dish before. I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, when we had the guys from Dishum. So yeah, what are you having today, Sarah?
Today, I mean, I've already had my iftar, so I had.
What did you have today?
I had some more leftovers, and it was primarily Egyptian food as well. I didn't have molokhia today. Sorry to disappoint. But I had, what's one of my favorite Egyptian dishes? It's like Egyptian lasagna. It's called macarona bil bechamel. Like I was talking about it yesterday, I think as well. It's like layers of bechamel and then mincemeat and then spaghetti. It's very simple, gorgeous.
Oh wow! Oh my God, that sounds really nice. Now, and I'm feeling hungry now. I have to say. Dr. Ismail, I'm going to unmute you. Whereabouts? Because you're also calling from somewhere interesting. So where are you calling from, Dr.? Here you go.
I'm in London, so nowhere interesting.
Oh, right.
What percent of the known universe depends upon your view of things.
One of your colleagues, I think, is calling from Turkey, and that's why I thought you might be calling from there also.
No, yeah, Turkey's a lovely country, but for a few reasons. No, it's a lovely country, but for no reasons.
Okay, so what's for iftar today?
That's a good question because I have 3 teenage sons who are also wondering what the devil daddy has cooked. And let's put it this way, it's been a busy day.
Has it?
Yeah, I think it might be halal KFC that's being cooked.
Oh, do you know what? On my way home, I've had an absolutely crazy day at work, and on my way home, I thought I could do with some KFC, but we always have like you know, conflicting opinions on fried food on RTP. You know, you're the fryer type, or you're the real fast, you know, real fried food type. So
I'm not a great fan of it, but you know, needs must. And I've got, you know, like I said, if I can, okay. So plan A was supposed to be salmon, which I'll do with some cashew nuts and some other things. But plan B is definitely, and plan B looks like it's going to be, but turning quickly to plan A, is going to be something that I will order in or drive through KFC. It's shameful, I know, and I'm very sorry.
It's okay. I'm sure, you know, I think that's a fantastic option, to be honest, because it's Friday. Which moves us on to Kulthum, because like Kulthum, where are you calling from today? I haven't seen Kulthum this Ramadan, so it's great to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm calling from London as well.
And
so we're having, it's like filo pastry with spinach and feta cheese, I think. It's like a bake. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Right. Now everyone's going to go. I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. So today we've got 2 speakers. We've got Dilaruddin Babu, OBE. So Dilaruddin, you can just wave or say hello if you've unmuted. And then we have Dr. Ismail Jalisi from Sinan Ren. So we're going to start off with Daw's talk for today. A little bit about Daw. He's completed 30 years in the Met Police and he's a former borough commander of Harrow. Now, Daw has extensive ward level experience in policing, community safety, child and adult safeguarding, and had also a particular interest and expertise in equality and diversity and mental health law. So he was the first chair of the National Association of Muslim Police and was elected to the National Police Superintendent Association of England and Wales. And in 2010, he was awarded an OBE for services to the police agencies. Now was a director of a school academy and a trustee for Médecins Sans Frontières, House of Illustration, and the Artichoke and Comedy School charities. So, Dal, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Super.
Excellent. Right. I didn't get the text from Dr. Ismail about pink shirts, but maybe we should have had that discussion before. But you carry it off much better than me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a subject that's fairly heavy, but I think really, really pertinent at this time. I'll be talking about Islamophobia and also looking at how it helps us with sort of decision making and resilience. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the paradoxes that we have. We've had so much social progress in this country around issues around race and faith, but recently with the report that's been published by Dr. Sewell, the Commission for Racial Equality, Race and Disparity, I'm just really struck about how we're potentially going backwards. And that report was quite difficult to stomach because I made the mistake of giving evidence. But when I gave evidence, it was a bit like a Fawlty Towers episode because they'd called for former police officers to give evidence. And I turned up with some former police officer colleagues, and then they had other people coming in, and it was a complete debacle. But when the report was released, it just showed how the thinking behind certain individuals in prominent power. So I wanted to go back to a time when there was a little bit more enlightenment. We had the Race Relations Act in 1976, and it marked the beginning of change to social attitudes that recognise the equal value of people notwithstanding their ethnic origin or their faith. The movement for social progress grew to encompass establishments of formal rights for people with one or more of what's called the 9 protected characteristics in the Equality Act, which provide protection from a whole range of areas. These legislative protections have been matched by notable change in attitude. And I'm struck by a piece of work that was commissioned by the Equality and Human Rights Commission in 2018. It found that nearly 3/4 of people in Britain, that's 74%, had agreed that there should be equality for all people. But 1 in 10 individuals disagreed. Now, I thought 74% was a promising number given the kind of experiences I had when I was growing up in the 60s and the 70s. And it was not very progressive, and it was really quite unpleasant growing up in this country. So I'm pleased to see the progress that's been made. Set against this progress, which many of us felt was irreversible, the direction of social and legislation travel has been comparatively recent but prolonged spike in intolerance and hatred. Some of this can perhaps be attributed to the bitterness created by the EU referendum and the continued chaos it created. Although we've now left the EU, it caused quite a rift in this country. You were either for staying in the EU or against it. The referendum itself was a product of a retreat from openness and one world fueled by fear of the other, rapidly and apparently uncontrollable change, and retreat into an imaginary, nostalgic golden age. And the defense of way of life that probably never existed has always been, for many, the mainspring of the daily existence, and adds to a rising tide of anger, resentment, and hate. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission work noted that around 1/3 of British adults felt the efforts to provide equal opportunities had gone too far. In the case of immigrants, 37% felt that way. And in terms of Muslims, it was 33%. And the incoming president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, was unveiled in a new role. And she talked a little bit about race in her first discussion. The EHCR found that 70% of Muslims surveyed had experienced religion-based prejudice. 64 people from Black ethnic backgrounds experienced race-based prejudice. 61% of people with mental health conditions experienced impairment-based prejudice, and so the list goes on. It's clear that we cannot rely on the previous steady progress towards equality and valuing diversity of the recent past, but need to be much more active in identifying and addressing discrimination and hatred in society. We need to move away from issues like unconscious bias to being more focused on anti-racism. In order to combat something, it's necessary to identify and define it. Otherwise, the focus of attention can be lost. You will be familiar with recent debates about issues around anti-Semitism. There was an all-party group that looked at definitions, and although the definition of anti-Semitism was generally accepted, the definition that was put forward by various Muslim groups and non-Muslim groups was that Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. It was felt that the all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims felt that there was three chapters that we needed in a definition and an understanding. So Islamophobia was a process, actions, impact. We have attempted to incorporate all three dimensions in our proposed working definition, they said, and it talked about racism, Muslimness, and impact. They also noted that any formulation that seeks to redress embedded and disadvantage and injustice will be contested. Likewise, any definition of Islamophobia will be challenged. And I think what was interesting was when this definition was put forward, even though the definition on anti-Semitism was accepted, this definition was not accepted. And we still have many organisations that don't accept it, including the British government. In my view, the definition codifies what the law already provides: protection against discrimination on the basis of religion, belief, or race. It does not advance protections, but it does allow for gathering together examples of discrimination that are driven by Islamophobia to help identify the scale and the prevalence of the issue. The source from which it emanates and the success otherwise of measures to combat it include legal action. In this sense, the definition is not groundbreaking, but nevertheless, it speaks volumes that we still have high levels of Islamophobia in this country. The all-party parliamentary group was correct to anticipate that there would be an attack on this. And Richard Walton, who ironically was a police officer, chief superintendent, and he was my predecessor as borough commander at Harrow, and until recently the head of the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command, has suggested the definition that was proposed would undermine the effectiveness of the UK counter-terrorism strategy and lead to police intelligence agencies, Crown Prosecution Service, judiciary, prison and probation services being labelled institutionally Islamophobic. I have to say that it's credible that defining Islamophobic actions as Islamophobic could make these bodies institutionally Islamophobic if they are not already acting on unacceptable fashion. It is not the definition, but the manner in which these routine made stereotypical assumptions about people based on their ethnicity, religion, and act on these assumptions rather than the evidence that should be the cause for the concern. Richard Walton specifically suggests that the definition would severely damage the prevent duty. And I just want to, for those of you that would like to spend a little bit of time on Google, if you put in toxic brand into the Google search engine, the first thing that comes up is the government's prevent strategy. It's probably a massive own goal for the government, but they still continue to focus on the prevent duty. While Richard draws attention to the fact that legislation described the target of the prevent program and as those at risk of radicalization, the practice on the ground has been that Muslims are the primary target, and we need to be making sure that we work together to try and ensure that we don't allow this to continue. I just wanted to draw very quickly to the continued issues that we have around prevent. Lord Carlisle, who was the chair of the review until he was removed, was basically talking about the importance of prevent. And ironically, William Shawcross is now in charge of the whole definition, working and understanding of prevent. But William Shawcross is on record because of his issues around his views around prevent, which are that it's a good thing and that we should be focused on it. So you may all be aware that I've been supporting the family of Shamima Begum. I was asked, this was back in 2015, I was asked to help by the families because they were concerned about what had happened. And what I discovered, and I'd actually left the police at that time, what I discovered was that one girl from Bethnal Green Academy had gone to Syria. She had been radicalized. She was then radicalizing other friends of hers at the school. Another girl got as far as getting onto the plane, and she was taken off the plane by the authorities. Then the three girls, including Shamima Begum, went to Syria. Sadly, the two other girls have died. The interesting thing is that the police, the local authority, and in fact the school were all aware that the first girl was talking to these other girls. And the authorities, the police, the Tower Hamlets Council, had decided that they were not going to share that information with the families. And I think and when the families discovered that the police, the local authority and the school were aware of that and had not shared that, that was when I got contacted, and they were very, very disappointed at that. And sadly, you know, if the authorities, if they'd been honest about what was happening, the families could have stopped those girls going. So drawing on my conclusion, Britain is hugely divided across cultural, age and education lines. Has a 2008 study of national attitudes for hope, not hate, warned of a potential rise in the far right and anti-Islam sentiment unless politicians tackle long-standing disaffections behind the Brexit vote and the decision for us to leave the European Union. While overall attitudes in multiculturalism are softening, the opposite is happening with Islam. It found that between 2011 and 2018, the proportion of people who believe in immigration as a whole had been good for Britain rose from 40 to 60%. On attitudes specifically to Islam, however, the report found while these had softened between 2011 and 2016, this process then reversed something. It put down to a series of terrorist attacks and the coverage of grooming gangs in Rochdale and Rotherham. The most recent poll by a group of more than 10,000 people in July found that 32% of people believe that Muslims no-go areas existed and they were governed by Sharia law. So an attempt to locate these areas which don't exist has been made by people like Tommy Robinson, and they have spread lies and myths around this issue. Conversely, the study concluded that areas where people felt more in control of their own lives, optimism about their future, had become more resilient to hatefulness. And I think it's just interesting to see that for those of us who live in places like London, there is less Islamophobia than there is outside London. I want to end my remarks with a couple of quotes from Jacinta Ardern in the immediate aftermath of the Christchurch terrorist attack. She says, "We are not immune to the viruses of hate, of fear of others. We never have been, but we can be the nation that discovers the cure." And so we have to work hard to make sure that we continue to combat issues around Islamophobia and racism. And we also have to ensure that we condemn violence. And in the wake of George Floyd, we are seeing people moving away from unconscious bias training to anti-racist training. And I think what I'd like to end up with the words of the New Zealand Prime Minister when she talks about the answer lies in our humanity, and directly to the Muslim community says, "New Zealand mourns with you, we are one." So I think there is much positiveness that we can look forward to because we are, as we celebrate from across the world, we have people here from Sweden, we have people from Turkey and across the UK. So I want to end on a positive note and think about how we can sort of move forward and learn the lessons of allyship and learn the lessons we have of working together and being very, very clear in wanting to do the right thing. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Dal. You've touched on some really, really interesting points. I've been busy making lots of notes, so lots of questions to ask you for later. And we are now going to move on to Dr. Ismail Jalisi, so who's representing Sinan Ren. Now, the Sinan Ren Foundation works in three main themes: diplomacy, thought leadership, and executive education. And each stream is catalyzed by the mission of the foundation in producing programs and projects and results that incorporate their mission of innovation, inspiration, and identity. Now, I'll send you a little bit about, tell you a little bit about Dr. Jalisi. So, Dr. Jalisi, he holds a PhD in contact mechanics from Imperial College, as well as an MEng from Imperial. He's a member of the Institute of Arbitration in London and of the Academic Assessment Committee of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and he sits on various boards in NGOs. Now, he has led several global media campaigns and is well versed in media strategy and has trained spokespeople across Europe. He's a recognized expert in developing highly effective messaging and facilitating the building of high-powered media teams. He also has a history of work with and for human rights and justice issues, from the Iraq War to extradition, and he's a frequent speaker at international conferences and as well. So without much further ado, over to you, Dr. Jalisi.
That never sounds any better when one hears somebody speak about them. So thank you very much for the rather generous introduction, and thank you very much, Dal, for perspective on the present. I'd like to switch gear a little bit, and instead take the long view and take a view from the past, and take a look at the life of a man famously called Ahmed al-Sirhindi. Sheikh Ahmed al-Sirhindi was born in 1564, so it's a trip back to the 16th century. And he's called Sirhindi because he was born in the town of Sirhind in the province of Punjab, which at the time it was an important trading city on the route between Delhi, Lahore and Kabul. His father, Abdul Ahad, was a scholar from a long line of Islamic scholars who traced their lineage back to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, sometimes known as the fifth Rashid Khalif of Islam, and obviously from him to the beloved companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Umar ibn Khattab, also known as Al-Faruq, meaning the one who distinguishes right from wrong. So Sheikh Sirhindi himself in his life became known as Al-Faruqi, both because of its direct meaning, the capacity to distinguish right from wrong, and his lineage to Umar. From a young age, he had memorized the Quran. From the age of 10, he was encouraged by his father to memorize the Quran. And then his father sent him for further studies in what were then the great Islamic centers of learning of Lahore and Sialkot. And Sialkot today is known for its cricket bats, for those of you who are cricket fans. And he was taught by some of the leading Islamic scholars of the day. Many of them originated from Kashmir, which was a key province on this route of Islamic knowledge into India that traced its way back to Bukhara in modern-day Uzbekistan, and of course to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Ahmed al-Sirhindi was a very bright student. He studied, amongst other things, Quranic tafsir or exegesis, Arabic, Persian, fiqh or jurisprudence, history, literature, and of course hadith, the prophetic traditions. By the age of 17, he had graduated and was back in his hometown of Sirhind, training students who had gone to teaching in other positions across Mughal India. The fame of his knowledge and teaching soon grew, and the Mughal Emperor Akbar invited him to become part of his circle of courtiers and advisors. On starting his role, Ahmed was shocked and dismayed by the level of intellectual decadence, material corruption of the ruling elites. When he challenged the un-Islamic ideas and practices, prominent courtiers decided to make his life unbearable, and he was forced to resign. Dismayed by what he experienced, he returned to Sirhind, back to his old role as a teacher, with no view of returning back to court. However, this would be his first experience of many over the next few decades of speaking truth to power. Once Ahmed was back teaching, and he was soon confronted with a shift in the political and religious policy of the day that would test his mettle and his leadership skills and keep him busy for the rest of his life. The Mughal Emperor Akbar had decided famously to bring India under his control by initiating a policy of a new religious identity, which ostensibly was Islam, but in effect it was a pantheistic religion that was a mixture of Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and other philosophies, which he called Dini Ilahi, or the religion of God. Akbar went about making sure that only people who conformed to his new religion would be able to get jobs, do business, enjoy the patronage of the state, which is essential for things like the arts, scholarship. In those days, it was patronage of the powerful that allowed it to happen. As a result of the opposition from the Muslim community, and particularly scholars, as well as Hindus and other minorities who were seeing their identities being eroded and destroyed, Akbar decided he would close mosques, dismiss imams that opposed him, and went about further subjugating and forcing people at large to follow his new policy. He used his religious leaders to rubber stamp edicts of his own religious superiority and ultimate authority that had to be obeyed. He supplanted himself into the position of what, from a Muslim's point of view, would be the prophetic position. So it was a situation of prophetic replacement to ensure he could maintain his hold onto political power. And he was very effective at it, because it didn't stop even when in 1605, Akbar died and his son Jahangir took over the Mughal throne, because the first thing that Jahangir did was reaffirm and further embed his father's anti-Islamic philosophy. He maintained and further instituted a pogrom against anyone who spoke out against Dini Ilahi, the so-called religion of God, Akbar's religion. Akbar's pogroms against mainstream Muslims and his attempt to modify and destroy Islam started what was seen to be an inspirational movement by Ahmad al-Sirhindi. Through masterful use of writing and eloquent, articulate discussion, fused with logical arguments, he explained why the new philosophy was not in any way just or fair, and least of all Islamic. He used peaceful means to fight the injustices. He mobilized people and convinced key influencers, firstly in Akbar's court and then in Jahangir's. A wise and respected man, he was able to effectively criticize the state whilst maintaining critical constituencies, even amongst religious leaders and courtiers who were directly working with the emperor. At a time when the Mughal emperor and his coterie of advisors were trying to dilute Islam to appease others, dilute identities to subjugate a nation, Ahmad was at the forefront of the defense of Islam and stood up against them. His focus on Islamic reform to better knowledge and practice won him the title of Imam al-Rabbani, meaning the learned, wise, patient, and God-fearing leader. He was regarded as the guardian of the Ummah. An event in Emperor Jahangir's reign perhaps best personifies the nature and wisdom of Ahmad al-Sirhindi. Jahangir had ordered all people attending his court to prostrate to him as part of his ongoing consolidation of this religion that his father had invented and this godlike cult of personality. The courtiers told Jahangir that Ahmad al-Sirhindi would never do that. And even worse, he would mobilize people against this order. So Jahangir came up with an ingenious plan. He had the entrance to his throne room rebuilt with the headroom much reduced. This would force everyone to bow their heads as they came into his court. He then summoned Ahmad al-Sirhindi, knowing that to enter the throne room, Ahmad would have to bow. And he would then be able to use the occasion to say that even Ahmad al-Sirhindi bows to the Mughal emperor. When Ahmad al-Sirhindi arrived, he understood, upon standing in front of the door, why exactly the headroom had been reduced. So he proceeded to enter the room feet first. This both thwarted the machinations of Jahangir and infuriated him. Jahangir had Ahmad al-Sirhindi arrested on the spot. He imprisoned him for violating the mandatory law of prostrating before the emperor, casting him into jail. The famed Islamic philosopher poet, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, or Allama Iqbal, as he is better known to the Muslim world, upon returning from his studies of law at Cambridge, visited the grave of Ahmad al-Sirhindi, and he wrote a poem in his honor. And a few of the couplets of the poem he wrote talk about this incident with Jahangir. And if you will permit me, who refused to bow his head before Jahangir, whose burning soul fans every free heart's zeal? He who Allah sent in time as a custodian of the Muslims of India over the treasure house that is Islam. In the 2 years Ahmad al-Sirhindi spent in jail, he became even more popular, and his defense of Islam and Muslims, as well as importantly, his defense of the rights of non-Muslims, gathered an almost mystic legend about him. As a result, Jahangir was forced to release him, only to find that Ahmad al-Sirhindi refused. He refused to be released without the emperor meeting his demands. And some of those conditions included the need for Jahangir to accept that the Mughal emperor would not perpetuate a corrupt administration, and that it could be held to account both by the courts and the people, that a constitution should be initiated, that the nation under the leadership of Jahangir henceforth commit itself to focus on loyalty to God and not the leader, social justice, upholding and encouraging good akhlaq or Islamic character, that is to be devoid fundamentally of corruption and to reject the rights of the abuse of human rights, and make sure that the nation's treasury is not used as the personal bank of the emperor, his family, or worse still, his cabal of advisors around him. And finally, that there be a commitment to protect the Muslim identity so that no one would ever again try to impose a diluted identity. Emperor Jahangir accepted the conditions and started a process of reforms under the direction of Ahmad al-Sirhindi that continued beyond his death on the 10th of December, 1624. Jahangir's son, Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal, and Jahangir's grandson, Aurangzeb, ruled for almost the next 100 years, and following the reforms initiated by Ahmad al-Sirhindi. And as a result, Mughal India thrived under the banner of Islam. Ahmad al-Sirhindi played a critically active role in the religious, social, and political areas of Mughal dynastic rule and beyond. He never sought power for himself. One of the defining reasons that the Emperor Jahangir accepted the reforms and himself changed for the better as a person. Imam al-Rabbani's focus on ihsan, perfection of spirituality, ihkam, perfection of knowledge, and itqan, perfection of execution, throughout his life made for a lasting legacy that has been studied by people of knowledge throughout the centuries and to the modern day. The ideas and philosophies of Ahmad al-Sirhindi remain as vital today as they were when he first stood up and spoke truth to power so many centuries ago. These ideas underpinned Iqbal's vision of a Pakistan and helped the Kurdish scholar Badiüzzaman Said Nursi attain his goal of protecting Islam in Turkey. Ahmad al-Sirhindi is someone that we are proud to say was personification of what we hope to teach, what we aspire to live by every day in our lives, and that is servant leadership. And something that, frankly, the first speaker, Dal Babu, who has received our Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017, is a man who personifies that as well. Sometimes in the past, we can see a path forward in the trials and tribulations of the modern day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I've learned so much. We've got quite a few questions coming in, and I'm going to start off with some that I hope you can both, and I'd love to hear from you both and, both of your points on this. So now it's very interesting. Unconscious bias is a big thing right now, and those who hadn't heard of it previously have now. If you could sort of briefly explain what that is for our viewers who have not heard of unconscious bias. And you said there's a move, people are moving away from unconscious bias to racism. or identifying those 2 points. So how can this be addressed by the Muslim community? And also how prominent are these 2 issues do you feel, in your opinion, in the Muslim community? I'd like to hear from both Dal and Dr. Jalisi as well, please.
I think that the issue about unconscious bias, and I wrote an article for Eastern Eye, which I will put into the chat room, because I failed my unconscious bias training. I'm on the board of NHS, and I failed it. And I just thought it was just very, very interesting when you look at what unconscious bias says. It says that actually you can have bias and you're not aware of it. It's almost a get out of jail card. And the idea now, particularly post Floyd murder trial and the conviction of Chauvin, is more around anti-racist training. So I think that's where I would say the issue needs to be. We need to be much more stronger around these issues. And I talked about the definition of Islamophobia. Can you imagine a situation where the authorities would object to anti-Semitism definition? And quite rightly, we need a definition for anti-Semitism. But I was just struck by how we just did the idea of unconscious bias, and the whole issue of Islamophobia was denied because people felt that they wouldn't be able to investigate certain offences. So I think it's quite an interesting concept.
Thank you. And so, how prominent do you feel these issues are in the Muslim community? In preventing diplomacy or effective dialogue between those in the Muslim community and those out of it?
Well, I think they're really key because, as we see that if you look at things like Prevent, the government's strategy to deal with extremism, it focuses very heavily on the Islamic community. When we look at what was happening in Ireland, where Christians or people purporting to be Christians were blowing up buildings and individuals in Ireland, they did not go to the church and say, right, it's down to you. They understood that these people had a warped understanding of the faith. So I think that kind of understanding doesn't extend to the Muslim community. So these are huge challenges that we have, and we really need to be quite robust about these and challenge people when they raise them.
Thank you. And Ismail, do you have anything to say on that? We need to you can unmute yourself, but I'm going to ask to unmute you. Here you go.
Unmute. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. So I'd like to build on the points that Dal made. So anti-racism is, you'll find that the idea is more better understood amongst younger people. And the first thing in building your solution is find stakeholders who will work with you. But when I was a kid, the expression, I'm sure Dal remembers this, people said they were colorblind. It's basically, and it was a mistake. So there were good people saying they're colorblind, and what they really meant was, I accept your identity, I celebrate it with you, and I'm willing to accept you as you are. But it allowed the old-fashioned racists to hide, where they claim they're colorblind, they don't see color, and then they continue their racist policy. And so you'll see there's a lot of pushback against anti-racism. People say, why do I need to be an anti-racist? So that the first thing is to recognize that is our great ally in trying to deal with not only Islamophobia, but also anti-Black racism and other forms of racism and bigotry that are out there. And we can't hope to deal with bigotry that affects us as a community without building those relationships laterally. So the big advantage is, you look at the kids, you look at the young people, anti-racism makes sense. The second thing is to help people get there. Probably about a little over a decade ago, I first came across the whole alt-right thing. I'm a bit slow on the uptake. I'm, in fact, notoriously slow on the uptake. And the way in which they would make headway with people, and what was interesting was it was with a colleague of mine who got on with me, and I got on him with very, very well. We got on. And he helped me get frog spawn to show the children the whole cycle of development of frog and all the rest of it. Yet he bought into this idea of cultural Marxism being an attack upon society. Just because somebody espouses views, probably at the beginning end, if they're espousing, I hate all Muslims and I hate all black people and whatever, and you sooty this and sooty that, you know, the conversation's different, okay? But people who start on that path early on, get in there in the conversation. The more relationships that we have with people, the more conversations that we have with people, the more they start to understand what Islam is in terms of the way in which the average Muslim lives a very good life in this country. They live a very, I mean, most Muslims are decent, mashallah. I'd say they're very decent people, and share that with others so that they have a chance to celebrate it. If you want people to accept your identity, share it and give them an opportunity to celebrate it and build those lateral relationships. Sorry, I've spoken too much.
Absolutely. And also, I think it's really important that, you know, as a community, it's quite a diverse, the Muslim community is a diverse community. So it's important to deal with racism and bias towards each other before, you know, we can expect external communities, I think that's the point I was making, to address it, you know, towards the Muslim community themselves. So a lot more toleration. That actually leads on to Doubt. Your definition of Islamophobia was, yeah, really, really interesting. So what impact does the non-acceptance of this definition of Islamophobia have on the ability to create leaders in the Muslim community, or leaders who are Muslim and the non-Muslim communities as well? How is it sort of holding or not holding people behind, or, you know, is it not? So I'd like to hear, we've got about 7 minutes until Adhan, so maybe a couple of minutes from both of you would be fantastic. Now I'm just going to, here you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think it's a really important factor because, you know, when I listened to the debate around why we were allowed to have anti-Semitism definition and why we weren't allowed to have a Islamophobic definition, it just didn't make any sense. It made no sense whatsoever. So in terms of how it affects people, we don't want our communities to feel that they are second-class citizens, but that's how it felt. Now, interestingly enough, some organisations have adopted, regardless of the government's decision not to adopt it, they have adopted the definition. And I think what we need to be doing is ensuring that our communities understand that they are valued, they play a huge contribution in society. The first 10 clinicians who died during COVID were Muslims. So in the NHS, so we play a huge part in making sure that everybody is kept safe. Unfortunately, there is a small minority, just as there was in the Christian community, who have a very twisted view of the faith. But that we shouldn't allow those individuals who decide to have that view to impact on us more widely. And I think one of the things I thought was quite interesting with Ismail's talk, he talked about how generous we are. If you look at our families, if you look at the structure, you know, we are multi-generational families. You know, people are looking after individuals in the family. You know, we give zakat, we give that. That's a really, really important iftar. I mean, this is, you know, it's great to have this event, but you know, one of the things I enjoy with iftar is you're getting together with people and you're sharing very, very basic food, but you're sharing it. So I think there's a lot we can learn, and I think it's about making our young people proud of their history and where they come from.
Thank you, Dan. And it's obviously, so what impact do you think this not having a definition of Islamophobia, and what impact does this decision have on creating leaders who are Muslim, if any?
So yeah, it will have massive effect, and you can see that if you look historically prior to a definition of Islam of anti-Semitism. So a bit of framework. Remember that Europe had been killing Jews actively, right? They had killed them actively. If you consider the First Crusade, what was said at the time was, if you can't kill the Saracen in the Holy Land, then kill the Saracen in your country, in Europe. Kill the Saracen at home. And what did they mean? And so their Jewish communities were slaughtered in Germany, in France, in England. Famously, they were slaughtered, I believe it was York, and the Jews were thrown out. And so this is a 1,000-year process that culminated in the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were wiped out. The mechanization of murder. I remember looking at the figures last year or a few years ago, and it worked out as something, if I have in my head, something like 80% of Jews in Eastern Europe were destroyed, were murdered, slaughtered, sent off to the death camps. 60% in Western Europe, right? What we don't talk about sometimes is that at the same time, after the Ottomans withdrew from Eastern Europe, there had been a slow erosion and decimation of Muslim communities in Eastern Europe. And the absence of a clear, of that line, which says that, this is how we treat people, and that you can't pretend that it's something else. This is actually a form of bigotry, is something that can enable far worse. And it's not that long ago that we saw it in Bosnia. The discourse was that they're animals, that they're descended of barbarians, and lacking a firm definition. So in the absence of a firm definition, it prevents people coming up to positions of leadership because they won't be accepted. And that's damaging both to as Dar's already mentioned, damaging to the identity of Muslims in Britain. As British citizens, they feel like second-class citizens. It's also damaging to the country as a whole, because what it does is it undermines the inherent diversity in a society. So we don't benefit from everyone. So society actually does worse. We're shooting, this bigotry shoots everyone in the foot, frankly.
So Gal, thank you. Ismail, thank you so much. I'm just conscious of the time we have. I'll run again in about a minute. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. What I've taken away from that is, it's so important to have tolerance with each other and individually and within the faith, because once we have that within the faith, we can also, stand up as a community, as a Muslim community, and stand up for social justice as well, to address the problems that you have highlighted. And we'd like to hear some final thoughts before we finish up after Adhan, if you'd like to stay. And before we move on to Adhan, we'll have just a couple of minutes, a few seconds for reflection.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
أشهد أن لا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
So thank you once more for joining us today. Today we've been joined by Adela and Babu and Dr. Ismail Jalisi. Now, before we hear their final thoughts on the talk today about diplomacy and leadership, I would just like to say a really big thank you once again to our media partner, Islam Channel, and the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. And also, please don't forget to get your own exciting My Open Iftar packs from Ramadan10project.com and read more about how we're fighting world hunger with Islamic relief. So, as Ramadan is a month of charity and giving, I'd like to tell you about Launch Good's Ramadan Challenge. So with the Ramadan Challenge, you can automate your giving, and this can support different projects around the world and setting up a donation amount to different campaigns daily and throughout the month. And so for everyone who signs up to the Ramadan Challenge using our link, RTP will be given a top up of $50 from Launch Good. Now you can sign up for this at launchgood.com/team RTP. So just before we finish off and say salam, any final thoughts from Yudal and Ismail before we say bye to our viewers?
Well, I'd just like to thank you very much for the invitation. I think as I reach old age, I rely on young people like you and other young people to actually keep the fight going. And we've made progress, but it's so important that young men and women continue working hard and ensuring that we challenge racism and bigotry, no matter what type it comes in.
Thank you. And you, Ismail?
I want to echo Dar's words, really. So thank you. And remember the critical importance of speaking truth to power. They can only do it to us if we permit it, if we are silent. Build your allies, speak truth to power.
Thank you. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Thank you everyone for staying until after Azan. And we hope you enjoy Iftar and join us tomorrow again on for our virtual open Iftar. And for tonight, that's Assalamu alaikum from me. And thank you again. and Ismail.